When the Super Bowl comes in the same week as the NBA trade deadline, there's bound to be stories to talk about. We're going to talk about the NFC and AFC championship games. We're going to talk about the upcoming Super Bowl, maybe a little bit on the NFL offseason. And of course, we're going to talk about Kyrie Irving being traded to the Dallas Mavericks. Without further ado, let's get into it. I want to first thank each and every one of you for watching or listening to this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and follow us on any audio platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us, rate us 5 stars over there. And if you're listening on an audio platform, just know we're on YouTube as well. If you are on YouTube, like the video, subscribe down below, and click the bell to get notified whenever we release a new video. Oftentimes it's just podcast episodes, but we also release other content from time to time. So go ahead and subscribe, click the bell, you'll get notified. And the like rating really does help us a lot. It really suggests our videos into the algorithm for new people to find our content. We recently did a fun YouTube video podcast with special guest Miguel, who's been on quite a few times. And we drafted basketball teams from current and former U.S. presidents. So that was a fun one. If you're looking for a little more casual sports conversation, that was what happened last week. And we're going to have a fun episode next week with another special guest. More to come on that. So stay tuned. But this one's going to be a little bit more serious, a little bit more focused. First about the football, and then I'll get into the Kyrie Irving situation, because I could talk for an hour and a half about Kyrie Irving. The NFC championship game and AFC championship game have come and gone, right? 2 good games. I thought that's what it was going to be. Kansas City and Cincinnati were pretty evenly matched in my opinion. But like I mentioned, I had picked Kansas City last episode just because of the quarterback talent. And I believe Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. And as I've said on various platforms, I think he has a chance to be one of the better quarterbacks of all time. Just incredible raw talent, his arm talent, his legs. He's just incredible pocket presence, accuracy, deep ball. He's got it all. But it was still a good game. And then you had the NFC championship game where I picked the Eagles because I believed in the quarterback talent once again, and Jalen Hurts over Brock Purdy. And that's not to say Brock Purdy's a bad quarterback. He certainly had some great performances on this run to the NFC championship game, but he hasn't been stellar, and he's made some throws that show that he still needs some growth. So I didn't expect that to be a blowout, and I think a lot of people didn't. And if it weren't for injuries to both Brock Purdy and Josh Johnson, maybe it wouldn't have been. But I'm going to start with the AFC championship game because I think that was more intriguing and more fun. It's crazy when you watch a game like that. And as a Jets fan who hasn't had solid quarterback play since a year of Ryan Fitzpatrick, and before that since maybe Chad Pennington, it's been a while, maybe Vinny Testaverde, maybe a half a year of Brett Favre, and then before that, Joe Namath, right? there hasn't been a lot of quarterback talent running through New York, or at least the Jets side of things. And so when I watch a game like the AFC championship game between Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow, who I think are 1 and 2 in the quarterback rankings right now, it's incredible to watch. Those guys make throws time and time again that look so effortless, but are so incredible. And that was just my takeaway from the game. And I'm going to get into a little bit more specifics in that. But it was just an incredible battle between 2 guys who are the best at their position. Patrick Mahomes was clearly hurt. And you saw there was a throw he made. I believe it was to Juju Smith-Schuster. It might have been to Marquez Valdes-Scantling, where Patrick Mahomes kind of limped off the field. And you could see at that point that his ankle was a problem. And I think that's going to be something that's definitely relevant in the Super Bowl. But he's just incredible. He ended up going 29 of 43 for 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. He did take 3 sacks, but only for 11 yards. Really not too bad. But I think what's interesting is that we looked at the Chiefs in the offseason, losing Tyreek Hill, and thought they were going to take a step back. And at the beginning of the year, it looked like Patrick did take a step back. But as the season went through, he improved and, got more familiar with guys like MVS, who I mentioned, guys like Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, Sky Moore, even doses of Nicole Hardman and Juju, and even Kadarius Toney had some moments this year, albeit in between injury after injury. But he's outside of Travis Kelce. He doesn't have elite weapons, and he makes the best of those weapons. They improve the offensive line with the extra money they had from not paying Tyreek Hill and not paying some other guys, and made notable additions that helped their team. and they kept Patrick Mahomes comfortable enough in the pocket to make the plays when he needed to. The other side, Joe Burrow, I think, had a good game. The Bengals really couldn't establish a rushing attack. That shows by the fact that Joe Burrow is their leading rusher at 30 yards for 4 attempts. But he ended up going 26 of 41 with 270, 1 touchdown, and 2 interceptions, both of which loomed large. An incredible trio of weapons there, but you saw when Tyler Boyd went out, their offense couldn't do as much, especially with the running game suffering. Guys like Hayden Hurst, I think, are good options in the passing game. Even guys like Samaje Perine and Joe Mixon out of the backfield, I think, are great accessory options, but I don't think you want any of those to be your third option. And that's what they were forced to be, because it was Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, obviously, but then there was a drop-off when Tyler Boyd got hurt. And I think that definitely limited them. There was moments in the game where Joe Burrow made throws that I didn't think he could have, and that was impressive. And I think there's a real potential step up for him into, I shouldn't say into another conversation, because he's already in the conversation with Patrick Mahomes, but into an echelon where it's the two of them and no one else. And I love Josh Allen as a player. In terms of the way he plays the game, it's fun to watch, even though he irritates the crap out of me being a Jets fan. But I think these two guys, I think Mahomes is significantly better than than Allen, rather. And I think Burrow could easily take that step going into the offseason. And I wouldn't hate, if you had the opinion that Joe Burrow is better than Patrick Mahomes right now, I wouldn't hate the idea. I vehemently disagree, but I wouldn't hate the idea. He has that confidence, that swagger, that pocket presence, that ability to look like the game is slowing down around him, that guys like Tom Brady have, guys like Joe Namath has, right? Like the Broadway Joe kind of personality and atmosphere around him really has taken that team from one of the bottom feeders of the NFL to a Super Bowl contender year after year. Those are the two upper echelon quarterbacks in the league, in my opinion. And Joe Burrow has gone a decent way in solidifying that throughout the playoffs. Overall, a good game, but Cincinnati just couldn't get it done when it mattered most, and Kansas City takes this one home. And then on the other side, we had the 49ers and the Eagles. And you could see when Brock Purdy got hurt, he was hurt. And it comes out he's going to have UCL surgery. It's a tear of the UCL. And whether it's repair or reconstruction is going to dictate a large part of his recovery time. And if he's having full Tommy John reconstruction of the UCL, then he's going to be out all of next year. And the 49ers are either going to have to start Trey Lance, or they're going to have to go sign someone else. And I think there's a real world where they're comfortable starting Trey Lance and bringing in a backup, whether it's a guy like Matt Ryan, who has history with Kyle Shanahan, or a guy like even like someone a little lesser, like Kyle Allen, or I know Colt McCoy signed, but that kind of echelon of player. I could see them bringing in someone like that just in case Brock Purdy's not healthy. But I feel they're confident in Trey Lance as an option next year, but they want Brock Purdy healthy. I think Brock Purdy's the starter week 1 if he's healthy. But he was clearly impacted in this game. And you saw it after Josh Johnson went out with a concussion, Brock Purdy came in and he could not make a throw. And it just hurt to watch, man. There was an early decision that I did want to talk about that was surprising to me. It was the deep ball by Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith. An incredible reach up and grab by Devontae Smith, but he didn't held on to the ball, and it was an incomplete pass. Not a great throw, but an incredible catch, at least we thought. Now, he lands, and admittedly, I'm watching this. I had no idea whether he caught the ball, but if he did, it would have been incredible. He got up, and he immediately starts doing this fist bump motion, and I'm doing it on the YouTube video if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're listening via podcast, it looks like you're fist bumping with yourself kind of in front of your face. And he's running urgently to everyone doing this motion, and I'm screaming, not out loud because I live in an apartment, and it was late at night, being that it's on the East Coast, but I was screaming internally, challenge, because that urgency, whether we have no idea what the motion means, right? This is not a universal motion to say, we need to hurry up. But the fact that he was so urgent and they were running to the line, he knew he didn't catch that ball. It was so painfully obvious. Devontae Smith knew he didn't catch that ball. And Kyle Shanahan didn't challenge him. You get 2 challenges in a playoff game. And if you hit them both, then you get a third one. So Do you really think that you're going to have a situation where you might lose that challenge and then you need two more challenges, or were you worried about not, having two extra challenges? What I don't understand why they didn't immediately challenge that, because the urgency that he was running with, it just made it so apparent. Because out of anyone that knows whether a receiver caught a ball, there's two guys, in my opinion, that should be able to know right away, at least live. It's the receiver, number one, and the official right there, number two. And then it's the defensive back, and then, a host of other audiences and people that were watching. And, live replay would obviously have it more sufficiently than some of the people that were watching live, but he knew he didn't catch it based on his reaction. So the idea that you wouldn't challenge it is ludicrous to me. And I consider Kyle Shanahan one of the best, if not the best coach in the NFL right now. I would say he's up there with Bill Belichick. He's up there with, I don't know who you would include, Andy Reid, Mike Tomlin, whoever you want to throw in that discussion. He's one of the best coaches in the league, especially offensively. But that was just a boneheaded decision. I to this moment, I don't know why you wouldn't throw the challenge flag. And obviously, hindsight is 2020. You could look back and say, well, he obviously should have thrown the challenge because it was an incomplete pass. Even if it wasn't, the fact that he's running up to the line makes obvious something shady happened. And so he obviously ended up dropping the ball, and the 49ers didn't challenge fast enough, and the Eagles run to the line and they end up scoring a touchdown. They never really looked back. I mean, the 49ers did end up tying the game, which was impressive. But they were out of it because of the quarterback injury. It's not to say the Eagles weren't talented. The Eagles are very talented, but they haven't necessarily been challenged in the playoffs. They had a first round bye and then played the Giants, who probably shouldn't have been in the second round, and then played the injured 49ers in the NFC Championship game. They're going to face a challenge this week, and that brings me to the discussion of the Super Bowl. Listen, Jalen Hurts hasn't had a good game so far in these playoffs. He just hasn't. He had, I believe, 121 yards. Yes, 121 yards against the 49ers, and I can see how many yards he had against the New York Giants. But overall, he hasn't had a great playoff game, and he had a playoff game last year, but he didn't have a good one. They got eliminated by they were the 7 seed. I forgot who was the 2 seed last year in the NFC, but they got eliminated instantly. And this year he had those 2 games, the NFC Championship game, like I mentioned, 121 yards in the division round. Let me see. He had 154 yards. He did have 2 touchdowns, which he had none of in the game against the 49ers, but he hasn't had a stellar performance. I mean, is he Patrick Mahomes? No, but a lot of people consider him to be in that next tier of quarterback. And I can't yet until I see it on a big stage. And I know he had a great regular season, right? Really performed well. But when you have a significant upgrade at weapons, when you have talent all over the field, offense, defense, special teams, in the coaching box, right? Or not in the coaching box, but on the sidelines, they have so much talent from top to bottom. Obviously, he's going to look pretty good. And that's what this situation is going to be. There's a few position battles that I'm interested to watch in the Super Bowl. And one of them is Jalen Hurts and the Eagles passing attack against the Chiefs secondary, which is a little bit banged up. But the Eagles wide receivers are very good, right? A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are an incredible pair. I'm looking to see if they could take advantage of those matchups and get big plays like they did against the 49ers, even if they didn't, translate throughout the whole of the game. They had a big play early, which was an incomplete pass, but, covered that enough. And then another matchup that I think is going to be interesting to watch is the reverse, is Kansas City's wide receivers against Eagles defensive backs, because those wide receivers are pretty knocked up, right? Juju was knocked up. Who else was having medical issues? Knocked up, I mean injured, not whatever else you think knocked up could mean. But Juju had an injury. Kadarius Toney got hurt in that game. I believe MVS might have left as well. There was injuries all over the field in the wide receiver room, at least. So that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. Who's healthy? Who's ready to go? And who's ready to match up against the Eagles secondary is incredible. I mean, they already were pretty good, and then they add a guy like James Bradbury, who was cut by the New York Giants because Dave Gettleman is a horrible GM and put them in salary cap hell. So Joe Shane, their new GM, had no choice. But that's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. How much is Patrick Mahomes going to be able to rely on those wide receivers? Because Travis Kelce can only do so much, and the ground game can only do so much against a really, really good Eagles front seven. So, if I had to pick today. And also one thing to watch is Patrick Mahomes' ankle. I wanted to mention that. Jalen Hurts' shoulder looks good, but he also hasn't been tested. But I think Patrick Mahomes is more hurt than Jalen Hurts is. And so those injuries are definitely going to play a part. If I had to pick right now, I'm picking Kansas City, and I'm picking them to win by a touchdown. If Patrick Mahomes is more compromised than I think, which is, what I saw at the end of that game, then I think the Eagles could have a good shot. And if the wide receiver room isn't healthy, and if the Chiefs secondary isn't healthy, then the Eagles might win handedly. The Eagles might win. You know what I'm saying? The Eagles might win by a decent amount. But I'm picking the Chiefs right now by a touchdown. That's my final guess, my final prediction for the Super Bowl. Now on to the NBA. Kyrie Irving, man. Let me take a drink of my soda first. Kyrie Irving, man. I don't know how many times I've said that in my life. As a Nets fan, you can see on YouTube, I'm wearing my Nets t-shirt here. As a Nets fan in 2019, when the Nets signed Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, I was ecstatic. And I was ecstatic for DeAndre Jordan too, even though that was not the greatest move. I was ecstatic because my team that had just gotten relevant, with D'Angelo Russell and Karis LeVert and Jared Allen, was now making a big move. They were going to be contenders. And then later on, they traded for James Harden. I was all in. And the Nets made a good run, and they, were an inch away from making the Eastern Conference Finals game, or Eastern Conference Finals series, rather. And now, 3.5 years later, the KD Kyrie era is over in Brooklyn. Well, at least the Kyrie portion of it. So Kyrie's had his issues off the court. He hasn't had any issues on the court. He's played incredibly well for the Nets. He's an all-star starter in the East. When he's been on the court, he's played incredibly well, and he's tantalizing to watch. Absolutely incredible basketball player. But he comes with a lot of off-court issues. I think he's genuinely a good person, but he does stupid stuff. And all of his good things that he's done, he's donated to countless charities, to countless people in need. He's promoted a lot of messages that I think are positive and a lot that I think are negative. He's horribly misinformed when it comes to things like vaccines, when it comes to things like anti-Semitism, or just, Jewish lineage in general. But at the end of the day, I was okay with keeping him on the Nets because of the talent that he was. And he wants a max extension. And if I'm the Nets, I probably would have given it to him. I probably would have given in, just because he's your best shot at a title. But they put stipulations on it. And I don't hate them for putting stipulations. I don't blame them for putting stipulations on it, because Kyrie at best has been aloof, and at worst been a real issue. And Kyrie Irving didn't want stipulations, and I don't blame him necessarily for not wanting stipulations, because he is a top 10 to 15 talent in the NBA, and he knows that. And so he wants full max money. I'll never blame an employee of any business, any kind, for wanting the money that they deserve. And, whether a team is going to give it to him is a different conversation. And we looked in the offseason. Kyrie Irving wanted to leave last offseason. He was trying to find other offers, and other offers weren't out there. So he ended up taking his player option with the Nets. And that was, of course, in the midst of the whole KD drama and the trade request. And that was before that, I'm sorry, because when Kyrie opted in, then KD asked for a trade. And I got the feeling he was going to leave after this year anyway. And he had no value. No teams wanted to offer him a long-term contract, because they were worried about the same issues the Nets were with the vaccine or whatever it is. And that was before the anti-Semitism, movie that he promoted became an issue. So his value was in the dirt. And he comes back, he plays really well for the Nets, and they end up moving on. And it's because he, like I mentioned, didn't want stipulations in the contract. He asked for a trade. And part of me thought that there was a chance they wouldn't trade him, that they would keep him until the offseason, let him walk, and then trade KD at that point if they didn't have assets to compete. But they would try one more year of running at the title. And I still think that's what they're doing. But they moved on from Kyrie. And I don't blame them. And I think they got decent value. But let me talk about that value first. So they traded Kyrie Irving to the Dallas Mavericks, who I think are a big winner in this. But they traded Kyrie Irving and Markieff Morris, who was not getting rotation minutes, for Dorian Finney-Smith, Spencer Dinwiddie coming back to Brooklyn. A 2029 first round pick. That's unprotected, by the way. A 2027 second round pick and a 2029 second round pick. Listen, this is decent value for a guy who requested a trade and had a half a year left on his contract. Dorian Finney-Smith is a very athletic, defensive-minded, two-way player, really. 3-and-D kind of guy with size and length and athleticism. And Spencer Dinwiddie, right, former net, who went and got paid by Washington and then traded to Dallas, comes back. He's going to be the floor general. He's going to be the starting point guard. And the Nets are looking up. I mean, Cam Thomas had a 44-point game the other night after Kyrie Irving requested the trade. So, there's some bright spots in Brooklyn. And I think it's very, very, very likely, and listen to me here right now. I would put it at 90% that Kevin Durant's last time with the Brooklyn Nets is in this season. No matter what the Nets do this offseason or these playoffs, unless they win a title. If they win a title, it might be a different conversation, but I think that's very unlikely. I think Kevin Durant's going to move on. And I think that's going to be via trade. I don't think it's going to be before the trade deadline because there's just not enough time and not enough time, I guess, for every team to get their assets together to get a good package for KD. But the Nets clearly are trying to make one more run at it by getting Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, but also got draft compensation because they don't have a lot of picks. They traded a lot of them for James Harden. They didn't get a lot back in the James Harden trade because they were getting guys like Ben Simmons and Seth Curry. I think the Nets could make one more move. They have some picks now. They have Dallas's 2029. They have their own 2027. And they have, I believe, Philly's 2029. Or is the other way around? The Philly's 2027, which is top 8 protected. And then their own 2029. But the unprotected from Dallas is great, especially since Luka's contract is up before then. So if he doesn't sign an extension, that pick could be very good. I think they flipped those assets for someone. I don't know whether it's a guy like OG Anunoby, who's more of a defensive threat, and they kind of lean into this defensive profile with KD and Spencer Dinwiddie and Dorian Finney-Smith and Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton, who's in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. Or maybe it's an offensive punch because they need more offense now from a guy like DeMar DeRozan or Zach LaVine, or I don't know what the move is here with those picks. But I think they make a move and they acquire another piece for a run at the championship this year and move on from Kevin Durant in the offseason. Listen, I like Kevin Durant as a basketball player. I love him as a basketball player. I love watching him. I'm so glad that he signed with the Nets. Never regret signing. Well, I don't regret the Nets signing KD or Kyrie or trading for James Harden. It's a disappointment they didn't win a title, but I am smart enough to recognize when a team should move on from a player. And if they don't go anywhere this season, I think that this offseason is the time. Maybe it's to send him to Portland for, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharpe, and picks. Maybe it's to send him to New Orleans for, I don't know, Herb Jones and Jonas Valanciunas and picks. New Orleans has a lot of picks, especially from the LA deal and a few others. I don't know where that package is that goes back to the Nets but I think Kevin Durant's going to be gone in the offseason if they don't win a championship. And it'd be disappointing that the Nets went through the big 3 era and didn't win a ring. And that being said, you do it every time. I talked about the D'Lo, Jared Allen, Karis LeVert Nets at the top of this conversation, but in that situation, their ceiling is a first round exit if they keep all those guys. So going after Kyrie, going after KD is not a mistake. It's something you do 10 out of 10 times. Trading for James Harden is something you do 10 out of 10 times, because if we look back to the season, was it 2021 when Kevin Durant's foot was on the line and James Harden left game 1 with a hamstring injury and came back hobbled, and Kyrie Irving twisted and sprained his ankle on Giannis's foot. That was their best chance to win a title. And it's disappointing that it didn't happen, but I don't blame them for trying. And I think Sean Marks is a good GM. I think there's a future of this team that could be built because they trade Kevin Durant for picks, and maybe, a team built around Anthony Simons and Cam Thomas and Ben Simmons and Nick Claxton and, Dorian Finney-Smith. Maybe that's where we roll into the future. But needless to say, it was a fun era. And if it's ending soon, I'll forever be grateful for being a Nets fan and living in New York when the Nets had their renaissance, because it was a fun time. I don't regret it one bit. I don't think any of the players regret it one bit, because they were a move an inch away from really making some noise. And, maybe a few injuries away from really making some noise. So thanks to Kyrie Irving. You're a pain in the butt from an outside off the court perspective, but an incredible basketball player, and I think still a good person. So best of luck to him in Dallas. More on the basketball side, I think Dallas wins big here. They acquire a co-star for Luka that he's never had. This is the second best, or this is the best player they paired along Luka since Luka's been there. He's better than Porzingis. He's better than Dinwiddie. He's better than Brunson. He's incredible from a basketball perspective. And you have the best guard duo in the NBA easily. Luka, who's a top 3 or 4 player. In my opinion, this is the best or second best guard in the NBA right now. Him and Steph Curry is who it's between. And then you get Kyrie Irving in there, who's, a top 3 point guard in the NBA. Well, he's a shooting guard now, but you know what I'm saying. One of the best guards in the NBA. So, they can really make some noise in the West. And for a team that I didn't expect to land him, it's a good move for them. And Dorian Finney-Smith, hurts a little bit. Spencer Dinwiddie doesn't, but the picks are really going to hurt depending on the situation they're in. But it's a move you make 10 out of 10 times. You hope you can extend them, but even if you don't, I think it was worth it to try to make a run this year. One team I also want to talk about is the Lakers. You're telling me they couldn't have beat that package. The situation that would have had to happen is it would have had to get complicated with a 3-team deal, because the Nets clearly wanted pieces back, including picks, that allowed them to compete and have a little bit of a brighter future. And the Lakers couldn't give that, because they could give 2 firsts and Russell Westbrook, and they didn't want to give Austin Reeves, and they didn't want to give other young pieces. Okay, I get that, right? So what would have had to happen is Russell Westbrook and the picks go to a team like the Jazz, and then guys like Mike Conley and Jared Vanderbilt, and I don't remember who else is there. Jordan Clarkson, I don't know. Larry Markkinen, but that probably wouldn't have gotten it done. That probably wouldn't have gotten Lowry out. Would have to go to the Nets. And the Nets didn't want that package. They'd much rather have one that included Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie, who give them more defensive acumen and length. But LeBron's got to be screaming at Rob Pelinka right now that they couldn't make that deal happen. If they don't trade those picks for a star, or close to a star level player at this deadline, LeBron's gone this offseason. I would hope so. I don't know that he is necessarily. Let me rephrase that. LeBron should be gone in the offseason, because they're messing around with the last few years of this man's career. Anthony Davis can't stay healthy, and Russell Westbrook isn't good. So even if they're trading, whether they're trading him or not, you've fumbled the bag. The trade for Russell Westbrook screwed over the Lakers' title chances, because they were a good team where they were with Kyle Kuzma and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, right? These were real depth pieces that they traded away to Washington for a guy who was a horrible fit and has not played up to his career billing. So I hope they move on from LeBron just for his sake. And I've talked about that on previous podcast episodes. I hope they make that move and send LeBron somewhere he can compete for a title. I was hoping it would be Brooklyn with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, but there's no way in hell that happens now. But wherever it is, whether it's to Cleveland, whether it's to Golden State, I don't want him going back to Golden State, because I should say I don't want him going to Golden State, because that wouldn't be fun. Someone who likes LeBron and doesn't love the Warriors necessarily. But I hope they trade him to somewhere that he can compete before he eventually moves on to the team that Bronny's on, because that's what he's going to do when his son reaches the NBA. But I hope next year is not another wasted year from LeBron if this one ends up being that. That'll do it for this episode of the podcast. If you like our content, there's links in the descriptions to us on all platforms at Lots of Thoughts Sports. I almost gave my personal handle out. At Lots of Thoughts Sports on most platforms, except for Twitter at LOT Sports Pod, or you can visit our website, lotsofthoughts.godaddysites.com. If you're on YouTube, like the video, subscribe. If you're on a podcast platform, rate us 5 stars. If you're on either of those platforms, switch over to the other one and do the recommended action on that platform too. I'd really appreciate it. Check our content out in the links to the description. I already said that. I'm all over the place. We're talking about multiple topics, Super Bowls coming up. Stay tuned for more football talk about the offseason and quarterback movement, which is expected to be crazy. Probably more on the trade deadline in the NBA, depending on who gets moved. Definitely more about the NBA later throughout the season. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Lots of Thoughts, a sports podcast. I hope you enjoyed and have a wonderful rest of your day.